So, Wayne Knight, you are a financial advisor at Edward Jones. Tell us what that entails.
It entails helping people figure out what they want to do financially and how to make that happen. It's figuring out what's important to people. It's partnering with them to figure out what type of solutions we need to implement to get them to where they want to go, and then keeping up with them throughout that process.
So this is a vastly different field than your first profession, which was farming. You grew up in a farming family. Talk about maybe some of the lessons learned through a lifetime of being around farming and then being a cotton farmer yourself.
So I think that one of the biggest things that I learned is you can only control what you can control. You know, you can control your daily activities, you can control how hard you work and what you put into the process, and then really the rest is left up to chance in a way. I mean, there's not a lot that you can do. You know, in my current profession, there's nothing I can do to affect what the market does, but I can do everything I can to help, you know, my clients focus on what's important and focus on what they can control on a regular basis. And so I think that's probably the biggest parallel, and also dealing with constant uncertainty. You know, you learn to just focus on the things that are the most important, and how you can manage that.
You before we began rolling here, you were talking about growing up in a farming family, and it was a little tough for you to walk away from farming because it's been in your family for a very long time.
Yep, so I would have been the fourth generation of farmer, but the business really changed in the last couple of years that I worked with my dad, and it was just, I had another degree, and so it was really something that was tough to walk away from, but I think looking back on it, it was a good choice.
Are there days when you miss farming?
Yeah, I think so. I miss some days getting off a tractor and being able to look back and see what I've accomplished and see what I've done. It's harder to tell that in my job now until, you know, maybe a couple years down the road. But that's difficult some days, but, you know, then there's air conditioning, so that's always nice.
So how did you get from farmer to financial advisor?
So I went to school, got my undergrad degree in political science, and my wife started law school, and I made the choice to continue farming. And at that time, once my wife finished law school, she was looking for a job, and it just happened to be kind of in the worst part of the job market in 2009, and so she applied all over the state, and she was able to find a place in a firm here in San Angelo, and so we interviewed, and 2 weeks later we were here, and I worked a couple of jobs in between and decided to join the National Guard. And when I got back from basic training, I started my MBA, and through a friend of mine who knew what I was doing, really felt like it would be a good opportunity for me, and so I looked into it and thought it was a good fit.
And what do you like about financial advising?
I think that it's being able to help people do what they don't think they're going to be capable of doing. I think everybody has this idea that, or a lot of people have an idea that it's impossible to accomplish some of the things that they want to accomplish, and that's not the case. It just takes focus, and my job is to help them focus and keep up with them on a regular basis and understand, you know, what really matters, and kind of separating that out from some of the other ideas that they have, and just making that, you know, putting that into practice and helping them stick with it.
And so you mentioned about joining the Army National Guard. Why did you do that?
So I think it was something I always wanted to do. I told myself I wanted to do it in high school, then I went to college, told myself I wanted to do it when I got out of college, then I got married, and so it was this thing that kept nagging at me, but it was important, and so when we found out we were going to have our first child, it was kind of now or never, and so I joined. My 29th birthday was my first day of basic training, and but it was something that I'm very proud of, very glad that I did.
And how long did you serve?
So I was in the National Guard for 6 years.
And what did you enjoy about that experience?
So I think that you get to meet a diverse group of people, people with different experiences, people with different backgrounds. It teaches you how to be mentally tough, which I think has served me well in my current job. It teaches you how to be a leader, regardless of where you are and what role you have. And it certainly reinforces, discipline and consistency. And so I think that was a big part of it. And then, being in the infantry, we got to use a lot of really interesting equipment. So,
of course, 20 Under 40 is a leadership award, and as you mentioned, there's lots to be learned about leadership in the military. What did you learn that you think has carried you forward?
I think I learned in the military what separates good leaders from bad leaders. I think I learned just as much from some of my experiences with what I would consider to be bad leadership as I did, and then contrasting that with good leadership. Being willing and able to do some of the tasks that you're asking other people to do, putting yourself in a position where it's not about you. Simon Sinek has a book out called Leaders Eat Last, and that's one of the principles. That's basically the title of the book, is that one of the things you'll notice in the military is the people that eat last are the officers and the senior NCOs, and so that's one of those things that I've carried with me, that leadership in most cases to accomplish a task is more about serving other people's interest than your own.
Now, you are also active in the Young Professionals of San Angelo. How has being involved in that group benefited you?
I think that it was really beneficial at the beginning because when I got to San Angelo, I didn't know anybody. And then when I started as an advisor, I really didn't have a whole lot of professional connection. And so it was helpful to meet a group of people that were in the same position that I was, where you have an established group of individuals in San Angelo, and then you have the people that are up and coming that will be the next generation. So I think interacting with them, going through some of the same struggles and victories as people in kind of parallel had, I think that was very beneficial for me.
So you think it's important for young professionals maybe to network in those sort of ways and maybe work together to better their community, which YPSA certainly does? Absolutely.
I think that as much as we like to think that we depend on technology and social media and things of that nature to make good connections, I think that you'll still find that most charitable organizations, most business organizations really get things done with personal relationships, and I think that's a great way to develop them.
So how do you go about deciding which civic endeavors in which you're going to devote your time and your talent and your treasures?
So that's a tough thing. I think there are a lot of causes that I would like to be involved in, but I have to stick to the ones that I know that I'm going to be passionate about, whether that's a personal connection or something that's affected me, professionally, maybe something, my clients have experienced. And then making sure that works now, especially with my commitment to my family and balancing those things out.
Is there maybe one or two things that you've been involved in as a volunteer that you feel particularly passionate about?
So I really enjoyed working with the American Cancer Society. That's a great organization. Had several family members pass from cancer, clients that either passed from cancer or struggled with that. And I think that, the fact that the organization focuses on all types of cancer, and my life having experience with child cancer and all the way up to older family members that experienced that. It was a good way for me to give back to something that I really believe in.
Well, and I noticed that on your nomination that there were a couple different things involving the American Cancer Society that you have been involved in. So I assume there was a personal connection. That must make it a little easier to really devote yourself to a cause.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a grandmother pass from cancer. I had friends that had children that were diagnosed with cancer, and several other things. And so, I think anything that you can go into with belief, that's a stronger motivator than anything else.
So the person who nominated you, former 20 under 40 honoree Mary Payton, who's also very active in YPSA, she called your leadership, quote, visionary, strategic, and authentic. Now, are you purposely seeking to lead in those sort of ways?
I don't think so. I think that it's just kind of a patchwork of experience. I've been fortunate throughout my life to have very good leadership examples, and I think that I've tried to, I think subconsciously a lot of that has impacted the way that I try to lead. I think some of it has been conscious, but for the most part, I just do what I think is right.
So leadership examples, is there someone who comes to mind that you think has particularly inspired or helped shape who you are and maybe your leadership style?
Yeah, so over the last 5 years, I think that would probably be Ted Jones, who was the first managing partner of our company. He made a decision in his career basically to give up his company and give that to the advisors and the associates that work for the firm. And so we're one of the few, if not the only, financial advisory firm that's a partnership. And when I was going through my MBA and studying about organizations, you realize that companies of this size aren't organized that way. And then you read the story about Ted and making that decision. I think that it had to be tremendously difficult, both personally and professionally, to basically give away your inheritance to the people that are help making it possible every day. And that level of selflessness and sacrifice, and the culture that it created has been tremendously impactful for me and for my family to this day.
So I've never heard that story. What was his reasoning behind giving up his company?
So he was instrumental in positioning Edward Jones in more of the rural areas. He wanted to make sure that those areas he felt were underserved had the opportunity to invest. And so, whereas most of the other firms focused on the big cities, we did not. Our first office in Texas was actually in Big Spring, and so going through that, and then when it came time for him to make a decision about the company, there's a story that goes that someone made the comment that he could have sold it and probably had more money than Sam Walton when he sold Walmart. And they asked him why he didn't. And he wrote a letter describing how wonderfully he had been blessed. And the last line of that letter that hangs in my office is money has never been my God. And so he made the decision to give it to the people who worked for the company, who helped make it what it was, and he felt like that was the right thing to do, even though it had to been difficult. I mean, he had family members that were invested just as much as he was in the business, and so to give that away, I think, was a very selfless act.
So how do you define leadership, Wayne?
I define it as influencing people in a way to accomplish an objective. I think that there's several ways that you can influence people. I prefer to influence them positively, but if you can't get buy-in from people, if you can't get the belief, from people, then you're just kind of managing. You're not really leading.
Wayne, it's a big honor to be one of the 20 under 40. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.